It's a little clip of Carl Sagan talking about how, it's like a 30-second clip of Carl Sagan's talking about how all of the matter around us, all of the elements that are around us originated in stars. All right. So at some point, a supernova gave rise to, it was like a nuclear reaction that gave rise to all of the different atoms that make up the universe and the solar system and the planets and our bodies and the biosphere. All right. Which is kind of an interesting thing to think about, because I'm going to, in a moment, talk about how all energy on Earth that drives all of the biological systems, the food that gives rise to the food we eat, also is driven by stars. So the very matter of our body came from stars, and we're kept alive by their energy. Kind of a beautiful thing. So, one way of thinking about yourself, one way of thinking about your body, is that it is simply a pattern. Your body is a pattern that matter is moving through. Your skeleton, for example, turns over about 10% of the calcium that's in it every year. So that means that there is a high likelihood that there is no atoms left in your skeleton that you had as a baby. Your body has turned that matter over, right? That's a kind of interesting thing to think about, all right? And so this constant flow of atoms, these different elements that are coming through your body, they need to come in through the food we eat. All right, and you can break a human body down into the elements that an organism is made up of, and we call that process ionomics. Like economics is the study of how money flows. And ionomics is the study of how ions, or elements in general, flow through the body. All right? Did you guys get that? You still typing? All right. So here we go. How much do you know about what you are made up of? How much do you know? I wish I could put this on this board, but
Can we just go for it?
sure. You give me one. Let's share it around the room. But you give me one. What do you think?
Calcium.
Okay. And is it a trace or a common element in the body?
I'd say trace. Oh, maybe.
Of course, the one marker I have is a piece of shit. All right, so he says calcium. Anybody else? He says that you say it's common?
Yeah.
Maybe this one works. All right. Come on. All right, cool. He said calcium, and we'll say this is trace. And is potassium common or trace?
I don't know.
That's cool. And we'll put a question mark there. What else, David? Hydrogen, is that common or trace? Okay. If anybody disagrees with any of these at any point, please speak up. Yeah. Carbon, is that common or trace? What else? Are we just made of carbon, hydrogen, calcium, and potassium? Yeah.
Good.
Okay, is that common or trace? All right. Iron, is that common or trace, would you say? Trace. All right. I'm writing these up here. I'm not saying that any of you are right, but we'll find out. What else? Is that it? Is that all that we are? Okay, who said that? Yeah, all right. Is that common or trace? All right. Does everybody agree with everything up here? All right.
Sodium.
Sodium, what is that? Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's hydrogen has been said. Oh boy. Have we? You know what? I think the human body's got a little phosphorus. Phosphorus, right?
Okay, is that common or trace?
It's trace though.
Okay, yeah, David. What's up?
Iron.
Oh, we got iron already. Do you think it's trace or common? Okay, so we'll put it over here as well. Yeah, deal. Magnesium. All right, is that common or trace? All right.
Going out here, but zinc.
Zinc. Okay, is that common or trace?
That's it. It's trace.
Okay. Why do you say zinc?
My train of thought here is that zinc is in the the little like the surfer tubes of sunscreen that are colored.
Uh-huh.
There's zinc in them, and somehow led me to believe that we have it in the body.
Zinc oxide, yeah. Zinc oxide and that stuff, it's really good at blocking the rays of the sun. Zinc is in the body. I would say there is some other clue that's a little bit more strong than that one. But good thinking. I like the
reach, but I
you reached. I like it.
it.
Yeah. Anna, you were just
I was really inspired by my.
Amanda. No, nothing. You're not sure. Yeah.
We have a small amount.
Small amount of arsenic. Okay. And is that so? You say that's trace? Yes. Fluorine. Okay, is that common or trace? Anything else? Who haven't I heard from?
Uranium.
I'm not listening to you now. Okay, is that common or trace? Okay.
Do we define?
No, that's part of it here.
Okay.
That's part of it. You think it's trace?
Yeah.
Okay. Why did you say iodide?
Here.
Okay. Ariana, you had said fluorine. Why did you say that?
I was thinking the 10.
Okay, great. Good. Why does iodide sound familiar to you? Yeah. I mean, you just heard it, or do you have like some association? Okay. Iodized salt, right? We eat iodized salt. Yeah. What's up?
Sodium.
Okay. Sodium's under the trace already. Do you want to put it under common, or do you can you? Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Anything else? So this is the sum total of us. Let me see here.
Lithium.
What's that? We got fluorine.
Chlorine. She said
Oh,
chlorine.
chlorine. Okay, I thought someone said lithium. Yeah, where's chlorine? Is that common or trace?
Bro, I drink chlorine all the time.
Okay. Someone had said lithium.
I did.
You did. Okay. Is that common or trace?
Trace.
Anybody have anything else on there? Is that it? You say
Trace amounts of sulfur.
all right. Behind that. All right. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing to think about because each of these atoms have radically different chemical properties on their own, right? But in collection, it gives us a human body that feels like the most natural, normal, familiar thing possible to us. Some of these are right, some of these are wrong. You missed some. So let's see here. The common elements are in green. So we got a few of them. This one should have gone over here. Nitrogen should have definitely gone over here. What big ones did we not get? You got all the major ones. You got all the common elements. You called the We did. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, that goes over to common. Sulfur should go over. That's right. A bunch of the ones you thought. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Chlorine's important. Sodium should go over here. Potassium should go over here. Yeah. Yeah, you got all the common ones. You missed some of the trace ones. David had said, one of the interesting ones, David had said arsenic. Now, arsenic is actually, we're going to study arsenic. In fact, in lab, you're going to have a whole project around arsenic. Turns out arsenic in even small amounts is toxic. It's a neurotoxin. And we do not want any arsenic in the body. So, yep, absolutely. And should I give the secret away? Maybe.
Within the seeds?
Well, it gets bioaccumulated in the seeds. Yeah, it like concentrates in the seeds. But an apple, arsenic doesn't just like come from the sun or something. It has to be in the soil for it to be in the apple seeds. And so people, right, because the arsenic has to get there, there's not like a nuclear reaction that's creating arsenic. So the arsenic, if you're going to have an element of some sort of mineral in a food, everybody, you read these things about what spinach has and what, this and that plant have in terms of their mineral content. The minerals that they're able to have are a reflection of what's in the soil. In terms of wine, we call this terroir. I don't know, are you guys wine connoisseurs at all in here? But it's the supposed flavor of the land. The terroir is the notion that you can taste the aroma of the valley that the grapes were grown in because of what they pulled into them from the soil that they were growing in. All right, and arsenic is found in apple seeds because in the 19th century, and I'm going to give away a little bit of what I was hoping you guys would study, is they used arsenic as a pesticide on apple orchards. And so a lot of apple trees in New England, apple orchards in New England, or even just land that used to be an apple orchard, has a high degree of arsenic in it. All right. But a lot of other things that you might not have guessed, like boron. Who's even thought of boron? Aluminum, silicon. There's a little bit of selenium in the body. You might have guessed iodine because of iodized salt. Your thyroid needs iodine. There's tin. Zinc. You might have guessed zinc because of those little zinc lozenges you take when you're sick. You need zinc for what's called a zinc finger. It's a protein structure in the body. Copper, cadmium, cobalt, chromium, vanadium, molybdenum. You get these things in too high a concentration in the body and it can be problematic, but you need trace amounts of these transition metals in the body. All right. But 98.7, the vast majority of your body comes from these 6 things. Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, calcium, and phosphorus. You're mostly made up of those 6 things. The vast majority of who you are is that. Does anyone want to guess what the most common element in the body is?
Oh. I believe it is nitrogen.
Okay.
My guess.
He's guessing. And what about you guys? Okay, you guys say carbon. Any other ideas? Hydrogen. So we have hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen. Those are good guesses. Why don't y'all defend them? Why do you say hydrogen?
We have a lot of in the body.
Okay. Okay. So by the way, we're going by weight. When I say what's the
Oh.
So he's saying they're saying hydrogen. Why do you say carbon?
Like gas, carbon, it's like heater that make.
Okay. All right. I like that rationale. I like your rationale. I like this rationale. Why do you say nitrogen?
Oh, because it was one of the 98.7 from 6 elements that I picked, and don't really. It's not.
There's a good reason to pick nitrogen.
A lot of it in the body, I guess.
It's essential for sure. All right. In fact, you're all wrong. It's oxygen by a large margin. The oxygen is so high for your good rationale. It's because it's in water, right? It's much heavier than hydrogen, though. There are more atoms of hydrogen than there are atoms of oxygen in the body. But by mass, there's much more oxygen in the body. So, yeah, why these six? Why these six? This is going to lead us into food here, right? We need to take in this food. Why these six? Does anyone want to speculate? Why oxygen we've kind of established is because of water, carbon. We're carbon-based life forms. Most of the molecules we eat have a carbon backbone. Hydrogen's part of water. But what about Graham here? He came in 4th place here out of 3. But he's got an interesting point. Nitrogen is super important. It's very common in the body. Does anybody know why? Yeah, Amanda.
Need it to live.
No, I'm asking her. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, that's right. It is in soil. We do need it in soil, and it's in vegetables. Why? How? Does anyone want to venture a guess? Yeah. Certainly they are. Certainly they are. Yeah, they are. Absolutely. I'm sort of asking you to elaborate. Why nitrogen, though? What is it about nitrogen? Does anyone have any guesses? Well, these molecules make up the molecules of, these atoms make up the molecules of life. So carbohydrates or sugars are made up of hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, sometimes a little bit of nitrogen. But the big one here is amino acids, proteins. Your body is mostly protein. And nitrogen is a huge component of protein. All right. So for your body to continue to make proteins, you need to have a steady source of nitrogen. We're also made up of lipids, which don't really have nitrogen in them. And then nucleic acids are a small part of your body, but an important part. This is the DNA, the blueprints, so to speak. All right. And that nucleic acid is where the phosphorus comes in. Super important. The phosphorus is super important. You have to have enough phosphorus for your body to function. All right. And you got to get it in your diet. Certainly calcium is important because it's in your bones. So I'm going to talk about nitrogen and phosphorus. I'm getting long in the tooth, so I probably won't talk about carbon, but I might, we'll see. So to understand why these elements are important, we got to talk about the food cycle. So like I just said, all chemical energy for life on Earth originates from the sun. And this energy that's coming from the sun in terms of the radiant light, the UV light that is shining down on us, is picked up by the primary producers of the world, plants. We call these primary producers of the world autotrophs. Autotrophs, meaning they are making their own chemical energy. They're storing their own chemical energy. So this chemical energy that's being stored by the primary producers, the autotrophs, gets taken up by the primary consumers, the herbivores, grasshoppers that eat. I don't know what grasshoppers eat. Actually, that's not a good picture. Grasshoppers are not herbivores, they're carnivores. They eat other bugs. I should put a bug that eats plants on there. But squirrels eat, nuts, and cows eat grass, etc. The primary consumers. So then this energy begins to work its way up the food chain as the secondary consumers eat the primary consumers and other plants. until it gets to these apex consumers, which are us, wolves, whatever, primary predators. So this is not a food cycle, though. For something to be a cycle, it has to be closed, right? It has to be closed. So the next step is the detritivores, the decomposers. Yeah, detritus just means decaying matter, whether it's decaying organic matter, whether it's plants, animals, right. So these detritivores break down the output of the consumers, and that becomes the soil that the primary producers require in terms of being able to pull in the micronutrients, right? So they can be fixing chemical energy from the sun, but they still need all of those elements, the calcium, the phosphorus, the potassium, the magnesium, all those little elements. That doesn't come directly from sunlight, right? It's in the soil and needs to come up into the plant from that way. So that's the food cycle. All right. When understanding how this food cycle works, let's just focus on the autotrophs for a minute, because the autotrophs are essential, right? Like if they weren't there, if plants weren't on Earth, there wouldn't be life on Earth. There would have to be something like a plant, some organism that's collecting energy from the sun and using it to drive biological cycles. So the three most important elements for an autotroph are carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Carbon is coming in from the air in terms of carbon dioxide. Plants take up carbon dioxide. That's its carbon source. So all of the wood on Earth, all of the food you eat started out, the carbon in there started out as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And then the nitrogen and the phosphorus both enter the plants inorganically through the soil. They're taken up in the soil. So there's nitrogen in the form of the ammonium ion and phosphorus in the form of the phosphate ion. So ammonium phosphate is a very common fertilizer. The ratio, so for a plant to be happy, for algae or any kind of autotroph to be happy, this guy, Alfred C. Redfield, discovered that these plants need to get these elements in a certain ratio. And we call this the Redfield ratio after him. Here's a picture of it. He first started exploring this in terms of algae in the ocean because it was an easy system. It was water. It's easy to measure these quantities in water. And that Redfield ratio is about 106 to 16 to 1 for carbon to nitrogen and phosphorus. And he found that these ratios in algae matches the relative quantities of those elements in the ocean itself. All right. So everybody needs nitrogen. We're going to start with nitrogen, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about phosphorus on Monday, I guess. I won't get through phosphorus today. So the air we breathe is mostly nitrogen. More than 3/4 of the air is, if you were to count all of the gaseous molecules, most of them would be nitrogen. That is nitrogen gas, N2. That's one nitrogen triple bonded to another nitrogen. The thing about nitrogen gas is it's very stable. It's very stable, and it's not biologically available. Plants can't take it up, which is unfortunate. They can't take nitrogen gas up directly. And they need it. Why do they need it? because it's essential for making DNA. You can see that little strand of DNA there, and DNA is made up of purines and pyrimidines. I have some examples of a purine and a pyrimidine, and you can see how much nitrogen is in both of those. All right, so nitrogen is an important part of DNA. And then all the proteins that make up our body are made of little amino acids. And you see that amino acid there. That's just a schematic of a simplistic amino acid. And you see there's a nitrogen in that as well. So the ability to get nitrogen is going to limit the productivity in a lot of biological systems. And because of this, that biological system may be a farmer's field. Because of this limitation, farmers need to add nitrogen to the soil for the plants to take it up. And this is what artificial nitrogen fertilizer is. So here's a bag of fertilizer. When you look at a bag of fertilizer, it's usually, there's 3 numbers that you'll see in any bag. And the first number is the nitrogen content, and then the second is the phosphorus content in a ratio, and then the third is the potassium. Potassium is also essential. And so a lot of fertilizers are all nitrogen, like that all-purpose nitrogen bag right there. Fertilizers can come in the form of urea, ammonia nitrate, ammonia sulfate. There's a lot of different forms that that nitrogen can take in fertilizer. I don't want to get too deep into that. But let's look at this nitrogen cycle just a little bit. So here's a very simplistic overview of it. And the part of it that we are involved in, we're essentially this big box on the right-hand side that has a green arrow coming in and a red arrow coming out. Ammonia gets converted to amino acids that are going to be eaten by us somewhere along the food chain, either in the form of a plant or some animal that ate a plant, or an animal that ate an animal that ate a plant. That nitrogen passes through our bodies. We excrete it in the form of urine, and that gets converted back to ammonia. That ammonium ion cycles through the ecosystem, going from nitrogen gas up in the atmosphere to ammonium and nitrite and nitrate. Nitrite and nitrate are soluble ions that you can find. They're oxidized forms of nitrogen that are in the soil. So let's put some details behind this a little bit. So it looks a little complicated, and I don't need you to know every aspect of this, but what I want you to see is that arrow coming out of the atmospheric nitrogen. That's that nitrogen in the air we're breathing. It's getting into the soil. How does it get into the soil? Bacteria. Everything good comes from bacteria. These bacteria can either be associated with the beans in legumes, the roots in legumes, or they can just be in the soil. This is the principal way in the natural system that nitrogen gets in the soil, and then it gets taken up, goes through these conversions from ammonium to nitrate that gets absorbed by plants, and then we eat the plants, and that goes into the food web. But another significant source you may not be aware of is lightning. I should have asked if anybody could guess. So lightning strikes.
Right. They used to, when the lightning would strike, they would go and the farming could till the land, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. Yeah, so it's high pressure, high temperature, high energy. It actually oxidizes the nitrogen gas to nitrate and makes it soluble into the soil. So if there's a lightning strike someplace, it'll initially scorch the earth, but then if you come back in a year, the grass will be greener than it would be other places at the site of the lightning strike. So over like a long period of time, it's not an insignificant amount of nitrogen or nitrate that gets into the soil. Sadly, this is not enough. This is not enough. The human population of what are we at? Like 8.3 billion people or something like that. And a lot of people, man. We need more. We need more nitrogen. Life on Earth would not exist without fertilizer.
How do we?
Yes, excellent question. Excellent question. Hopefully I'll be able to answer it. Well, the short answer here is the Haber-Bosch process. The Haber-Bosch process. That's going to be the podcast for next week. You'll learn about Haber-Bosch in a little more detail. But here they are, Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch. They were Germans that invented this process, this industrial nitrogen fixation in 1910, the Haber-Bosch process. Made them fabulously wealthy. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I said that nitrogen gas was unreactive, right? Biology could not take nitrogen gas up. We had to get it into some sort of reactive form, the nitrates or whatever.
Fritz Haber.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, he had a crazy life. You're going to listen to a podcast about his life. It's pretty amazing. Kind of a rough dude. So I've got this population graph here with nitrogen, total natural nitrogen. I'm sorry, with the industrial production of fertilizer laid on top of it. And what's interesting here is that the first arrow that you see there, what represents the advent of industrial production of nitrogen that happened in 1913. They invented it in 1910. It scaled up in 1913. And one of the interesting things is the ability of Germany to have an industrial source of nitrogen, fertilizer. That was one of the things that enabled Germany to mount the sort of offensive that became World War II. It gave them World War I. Pardon me. It gave them this ability to feed their population. But the other thing that's really interesting is if you look at the population, the global population blew up at that time. That is when we hit this rapid increase. The two track each other fairly closely. So the pink line, which is total reactive nitrogen, and the blue line, which is the global population. All right? Yeah. And then in the 1980s, the amount of total reactive nitrogen exceeded the natural end fixation that happens by bacteria on Earth. So we are making more artificial nitrogen now than is possible to be produced by natural means on Earth. In a very real way, the Haber-Bosch process led directly to overpopulation on planet Earth. I'm not saying that's a different debate. We're not going to debate that. So by the last fact, before I let you out the door, in 1918, by the end of World War I, Germany was producing over 200,000 metric tons of synthetic ammonia per year for use in fertilizers and, conveniently, in the production of explosives as well. So, all right. We'll pick up there on Monday. I guess I'm one lecture behind my schedule right now. We'll pick up there with nitrogen on Monday, and then I'll talk about phosphorus, and then we'll move on to DNA and how that makes a little bit of science background and where protein comes from, and then we'll talk about GMOs on Friday.